this short video, I'm going to make the case that NATO needs Ukraine more than Ukraine needs NATO. I know that's a kind of a shocking thing to say, but if you really stop and think about it, I'm going to give you 3 lines of reasoning to show you what's going on and to show you why that is true. It turns out it's not just Russia who needs Ukraine. Russia talks about, Dugin talks about how without Ukraine, Russia is just a country, but with Ukraine, Russia is an empire. They need Ukraine in order to kind of supercharge their system. Well, it turns out NATO kind of needs that too. They just didn't know this. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So right now, Russia's at the border of Finland. They're kind of expanding their preparations for future aggression. Here's the Institute for the Study of War 23 hours ago. Russia is reportedly expanding its military infrastructure along its border with Finland, stockpiling new tanks, likely in preparation, like stockpiling new tanks. Think about this. You're in the middle of a war with Ukraine right next door, and you're threatening a NATO country by stockpiling tanks there. Why wouldn't you be stockpiling your tanks and like ready to go into Ukraine, right? Okay. Russia's reportedly stockpiling new tanks, likely in preparation for future aggression against NATO. Russia is reportedly expanding its military infrastructure along this border. The Wall Street Journal reported on April 27th, citing Western military and intelligence officials, that Russia is expanding military bases near Petrozavodsk, Republic of Karelia, and upgrading railways. That's how they primarily travel and send their military goods, railway lines and other infrastructure along Russia's western border with NATO. Wall Street Journal reports that the Kremlin plans to create a new army headquarters there in the several years, and Russia is integrating roadways and railways into the Moscow military district with infrastructure in Belarus. Okay, so they're not going anywhere. Okay, meanwhile, Europe is doing nothing. No one here is aware of what is to come, not because there's no way to find out, but because no one wants to know. Like, NATO, like, what are you doing? Wake up. You got to, and they're not answering back whenever, like, a plane just flew into Polish airspace, a Russian plane, just testing the borders, just seeing what will happen, and nothing happened. And because nothing happens, more will happen. Okay, this is point number 2. This is really bad. Europe is struggling to even commit 25,000 troops for a potential peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Now, 25,000. It was 130,000 a figure, and that was the pared down version of the 300,000 plus peacekeepers that they actually felt would be necessary to maintain some kind of real deterrent force in Ukraine against Russia. And they can't even find 25,000. With armies undermanned and underfunded, a 64,000 strong force remains unrealistic. So 300-ish somewhere. I mean, I've seen figures that vacillated in the hundreds of thousands, pared down to 130, pared down to 64, pared down to, well, we can't even find 25,000. Focus on now shifts to training and air and sea support and rearming Ukraine. I mean, just it's embarrassing, but this is NATO, the mighty NATO, right? And Putin's seeing right through this right now. And in the U.S., we're not much better. I think I don't know if this is will. I think it's will. This is true, but I think there's also will. The U.S. will no longer be able to fund security in Europe due to its massive national debt, says U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. As of March 2025, the U.S. national debt exceeds $36 trillion. Now, that's bad. Now, there's debt a lot of places. Much of it came from the COVID era. But yeah, this could be an excuse, but just imagine if you're off the table now and you can't do that. Now that makes what's going on in Europe that much more vulnerable if the U.S. is stepping away and backing away and preparing itself for, like, looking at what's going on in Taiwan and what could kick off there between Taiwan and China. So that's bad. Okay, here's another reason. This is the next big reason why Ukraine is needed by NATO more than it needs NATO. Yes, it would like to be in NATO. Yes, it wants that protection of the group as opposed to just itself. But look at this, a major procurement move. At least one NATO country is reportedly attempting to acquire Ukraine's highly successful Delta battlefield management system. If you don't know anything about the Delta battlefield management system, basically Ukraine has real-time information about everything that's going on pretty much everywhere because they have these computers linked to satellites, which are giving commanders great access. Remember how you used to watch movies where they'd be pushing these like a little chip of a this column or this group or this tank unit or whatever along to kind of see what's going on? No, they know in real time. The Delta system is both accessible and feature-rich, enabling increased awareness and coordination across the joint force. Last year, Delta reportedly passed a NATO security audit and underwent capability testing for interoperability within NATO environment. By the way, the Ukrainians are the only armed forces really that can work with pretty much anything Soviet and anything NATO simultaneously, and pretty much any of that. I mean, they have it down. Delta turned the more traditional command and control structure upside down with an initial focus on the base individual soldier. Now, what does that mean? Instead of the general at the top telling you what's going on, they already have real-time data down at the bottom. They know what's going on, and they can feed that up to the general. Yes, they can do that, but it's not so much you go there as much as they know what's going on. It turns a brain into a nervous system. It's really remarkable. Delta aims to be user-friendly with its underlying feature set, enabling compatibility with laptops, tablets, mobile phones. Okay, so this is a pretty amazing system, and in a report released last year, CSIS mused that Delta may have reached a level comparable to that of the U.S. DoD's, that's Department of Defense's, long dreamed of combined joint all-domain command and control, which they've never actually quite fully figured out. There are two base modules which represent Delta's focus, a target hub and the Vesla module. The two work together to meld live drone imagery and targeting data into an accurate strike. Delta's main advantage has been its architectural flexibility, quickly incorporating new plugins. We created modules that have never been used in NATO before, says a lieutenant colonel. And then now they also have a weakness as well. Okay, so Delta's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. Data. The system requires the user to be connected to gain any real utility, and that connection means like a LTE or Starlink uplink, some kind of control, some kind of whatever. But Ukraine's Ministry of Defense claims the system uses 162 information protection measures along the way. Okay, so they need that. Like, it's already set to work with NATO. Now, one last thing before we move on to the last story I'm going to tell you, and that is what happens if Russia, and we have to factor this in because we're only talking about, well, we don't want to be involved with Ukraine. What happens if Russia captures Ukraine? Now, what happens? What's happening to the 4 oblasts right now? They're being enfolded into Russia. The children are being taught to be Russian soldiers. If you don't get those back, they're lost. They become part of a Russian army, which makes Russia stronger. What if Russia makes more headway and takes half of Ukraine? They're already wanting Odessa and other areas. They've talked about this. What if they take all of Ukraine? NATO would be up against it. They would be significant. So you need to not only deprive the Russians of that, but you need them within the fold. I joked with Operator Starsky last year. Actually, this was about 2 years ago now. This was one of my first interviews with Starsky. And I said, okay, just last question. Should NATO be allowed to join Ukraine? And he started talking about, yeah, I think Ukraine should be able to be allowed into NATO for this reason and that. No. I said, should NATO be allowed to join Ukraine? Like, what Ukrainians have done has been very significant, and we need to understand that. And he understood what the joke was, but like, I'm not joking anymore. Like, NATO needs Ukraine. Tell me what you think about this. Am I right? Am I wrong? Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.